Merry Chrysler, everyone. This is basically the end of my Enneagram series. I am not going to talk about the Enneagram anymore for a while because I want to move on to other stuff, but I have a few more points to make. If you want to know more about the 9 numbers and the stories that they correspond to, watch my Enneagram type videos. If you think the Enneagram is trash, watch my Fixing the Enneagram video. I think it's a pretty good faith. What the hell is that? Sorry, I live in Los Angeles now.
I am not calling him! I refuse to call him!
So I just want to go over some important takeaways and qualifications. Namely, I want to talk about the scope of the Enneagram in fiction. If there's one piece of information that I've been absolutely hammering this entire time, it's that the Enneagram is not about personality. It's a way to talk about inner problems. The 9 Enneagram numbers are just 9 common internal compasses that people tend to have, and we slapped numbers on them so that they're easier to talk about. But you don't have to believe that a type 2 is a real thing that exists. You just have to believe that some people seek love indirectly by fostering interpersonal connections, and the Enneagram calls those people type 2s. That being said, what if a character isn't that deep? Right? What if a character doesn't have some serious internal problem that they have to deal with? Well, if that's the case, then there is no point in trying to type that character. Not every character has an Enneagram type. Sometimes a character is just the goofy sidekick, or just the villain. I'm not going to split hairs trying to figure out what Mr. Boss's Enneagram type is, because it doesn't matter, right? He doesn't operate on that level. We almost never see him in emotional situations. He's just a collection of bits. Tell me something that would be out of character for the boss. You can't. I mean, I would buy absolutely anything, except maybe him straight up murdering the Smiling Friends, but even then you could probably make it work. If you've never seen Smiling Friends, you're confused right now. I apologize. Pym, on the other hand, clearly has a type 2 complex, which informs his decisions and shapes the plot. There's a very clear sense of what would be in character versus out of character for Pym. Alan, though, I don't know. Probably why his solo episode is kind of aimless. There's no point in typing shallow characters. People will go, guys, Jabba the Hutt is a 9. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, can you show me the scene where he represses his anger and pacifies himself to achieve a false equilibrium that muddles his identity? And in many ways, I admire people who write, those shallow characters. I've had people bring me extremely well-made screenplays that don't have any emotional depth at all. And I'm amazed at how they're able to squeeze so much entertainment out of just a funny criminal or an adventurer. Clearly, these people have been around the block and met a lot of humans, and they're basing this off those humans, and that's dope. For me, though, I always tend towards more emotional structures and frameworks, and arcs and lies that need to be unlearned and that sort of thing. Like, how do you know what to do in the 3rd act if you haven't designated an axis of growth for the character? How do you know who to pair up with whom if you haven't thought about their flaws and what they stand to learn from each other? I admire episodic shows that just spin up random situations and keep characters in character without worrying about the bigger picture. I admire people who can organically dream up plot without anchoring it in some emotional thematic framework. None of what I say is meant to denigrate that style of writing. All I'm saying is, if you want to write like that, the Enneagram is possibly not for you. The Enneagram is only going to be useful in cases where you need to get to the root of a character's trauma and coping mechanisms. That means it's not as useful in stories that take place in earlier developmental stages. A bunch of rambunctious kids who only care about goofing off and getting into trouble haven't developed Enneagram complexes yet. So if your story is pre-conventional, meaning it's about kids or adults who are mentally kids, the Enneagram is not going to do much for you. If you prefer to think in terms of archetypal good and evil, then a morally relativistic system like the Enneagram, where something that's good for one character might be bad for another, isn't going to do much for you. If you just want to use characters as mouthpieces for some thought experiment, and you're not overly concerned about making them human, I'm not going to insist that you use this tool. In fact, I would prefer that you didn't. The misapplication of the Enneagram is why it doesn't get taken seriously. So if you're like, the Enneagram doesn't apply to my story, great, thank you for being a part of the solution. I've alluded to connections between the Enneagram and my character sheet, but just to spell that out in plain English, this is your character's Enneagram compulsion. It's the root cause of how they act, how they present themselves, and how they relate to the world around them. It's the deepest level of the character, but it's also the deepest level of the story, or of that character's storyline. My consulting clients know that I like the Enneagram, and so sometimes they try to meet me on that level, even if they're kind of wishy-washy on it themselves. They'll bring me a story about a character who let's say, needs to succeed to feel good about themselves, but in the end, the character realizes that even though they failed, it's okay because they're still worthy of love. And the client will be like, I was thinking of making them a 7. And I'll be like, what? And they'll be like, yeah, it just seems to fit their personality. And I'll be like, yeah, nah, but this is a 3 story, so they're a 3. Like, you got to understand it goes deeper than just the personality. The Enneagram corresponds to the narrative ingredients you're working with. If you created a 7 but gave them a 3 storyline with 3 lessons and 3 themes, congratulations, you created a 3. The message I absolutely spammed throughout this whole series was to look at the why, not the what, purpose over personality. But there is a reversal. You can also detach the Enneagram from deep psyche stuff and use it as a general way to discuss human tendencies. Want to see a really cool story generator? Blank is preventing the character from blank. And then fill in any 2 numbers. Their perfectionism is preventing them from being in love. Their need for control is preventing them from being at peace. Their need for success is preventing them from being safe. Their pleasure seeking is preventing them from being authentic. You can even put the same number on both sides. Make it so that their desire for success is stopping them from succeeding in some way. Just something to think about. Okay, so your Enneagram type is not all of you, right? Which means when you've nailed down your character's type, all you're really nailing down is a few moments. If you have an 8 character, just pencil in moment where they show their vulnerability, and then a little later, moment where they relinquish control in service of a cause, and boom, that's your backbone. Pad that out with whatever you want. Your story can be mostly random plot as long as you nail the emotional moments when they occur. Another point that I carved out throughout the course of the series, but I feel the need to just state explicitly, the more healthy a character is, the less detectable their type will be. This is because the 9 type fixations are forms of unhealth. They're urges that stop you from being a good person. Everybody goes, oh, Captain America is a really healthy 1. I'm like, yeah, sure, but being a good dude who helps people is not a 1 thing. It's a healthy thing. A healthy 9 or a healthy 7 or whoever would do the same, because those are all people who have overcome their insecurities, aka their Enneagram complexes, to become good. Ultimately, your goal as a person in the Enneagram should be to dissolve your Enneagram complex so that you can get to what it's been holding you back from, which is a healthy, altruistic, conscious, secure state of being. So, since this is the last hurrah of the Enneagram on my channel, at least for the time being, I wanted to give a more clear explanation of tritype theory. I mentioned tritypes in the type 1 video. 1 in my tritype, which if you don't know is a way to categorize yourself where you pick a number from each of the 3 clusters like some limited time Applebee's deal. But I wanted to lay it all out here because I think it's actually a really great addition to the Enneagram that might actually warm some people up to it that weren't into it before. Reason being, it offers a more complex way of describing a person. Rather than just with 1 numbers, it describes a person with 3. So if you'll remember, the Enneagram is divided up into 3 clusters, right? You have the heart cluster, 2, 3, and 4. You have the head, anxiety, fear cluster in 5, 6, and 7. And then you have the anger, instinct cluster in 8, 9, and 1. The reality is those 3 centers are the 3 centers of intelligence in you. You have anxiety to some degree, you have self-esteem needs to some degree, and you have anger to some degree. So tritype theory asks, okay, how do you manage your self-esteem? How do you manage your anxiety? Pick one of those 3 numbers. And how do you manage your anger? You pick one of those 3 numbers. And then that becomes your barcode. Essentially, I'll just use myself as an example. I would be considered a 3-5-1. So my heart is in 3. I manage my self-esteem and my relationships with this sort of performative need to impress people, need people to think that I'm the greatest kind of thing. If I were, a 2 in the heart center, then that wouldn't be me. I would be someone who was overly concerned with maintaining my friendships and relationships. And if I were a 4 in the heart center, then I would have this sort of masturbatory loneliness thing going on. And then in the head center, I'm a 5. That means I intellectualize all of my anxiety and I solve problems up here. This is sort of a retreat for me. When I don't get something, when something freaks me out a little bit, I go, okay, let's consolidate. Let's get our shit together on this so that we know the best way to think about it. For a 6, that's not necessarily how they would go about it. If your head is in 6, then you're probably going to immediately start going, where's the danger? Okay, is that person bad? I don't think I can trust them or that institution or this or that. I don't live in the real world. I live up here. And then 7s are obviously just going to be like, danger, what danger? They're just these like manic go, go, go. If that's you, your head is probably in 7. And then my gut is in 1. All that means is I express my anger typically through rules and judgments and kind of, whereas an 8 is like, blah, 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 and a 9 is like, I have a college degree. And then you essentially list the numbers in the order to which they apply to you most strongly. So I'm mostly a 3. So the 3 is my big number, right? And then the 5 is the next one. And then the 1 is the last one. I'm definitely out of touch with my gut center. But that's how you frame a tritype. And when you're just watching movies and you want to get a better handle on a character, I find this is a lot better of a tool because they might have their main thing that's going on, but there's a lot more to their personality. And if you start looking at commonalities between, okay, how do they express their self-esteem needs, which usually relates to like the love story plot line of the movie, and then you ask, how do they manage their anxiety needs? What do they do when shit hits the fan? And then what do they do when they can't take it anymore, Or what do they do when their boundaries are infringed on? I hope this series has given you a better understanding of the Enneagram, or at least a new perspective. People often ask me where I get my ideas, not just Enneagram, but everything else I talk about on my channel. Like, hey, script man, can you please tell me the book or the class or the teacher you got this from so I can go to that source? And I tell them that there is none. I synthesized it on my own, and I'm not trying to suck myself off. I do have a point here. My point is that most people think of learning as just obtaining information. Hearing a thing, memorizing it, storing it, applying it. I was talking to a type 1 several months ago, back when I was trying to get a handle on that video. That's why I did the numbers in reverse order, because the 1 was the tough one. And he was getting extremely frustrated with me because I was asking questions about his brain and he was answering, but I wasn't satisfied with the depth of his answers. And he was like, why are you doubting me? I'm giving you all the information. And what he didn't get was that I wasn't just looking for information to log as true. I was trying to fill in the blanks of my own mental model. But for some people, there is no mental model with learning. It's just, here's the information, pass it along. And I hate to say it, that's like 90% of the communicators on this platform. And don't get me wrong, if you can take a Wikipedia page just at random and turn it into an entertaining video, that's great. You get points for that. But I think the best teachers, the truly transformative teachers, especially in the context of a soft science like personality theory, are the ones who soak in all the information and then create a theory that accounts for all of it. If you don't have a theory of your own, if you haven't developed your own vocabulary and thought process around a subject, then you're just a middleman. You're not adding anything. To really contribute and innovate, you have to understand the concepts in your own way. I would rather have someone cherry pick from my theory to build their own than just blindly adopt mine and treat it as gospel, even though they don't get it. I know not everybody is going to like my understanding of the Enneagram. I know some of my type videos resonated with people more than others. That's okay, because you're not just collecting information from me. You're building a working model to navigate the world and storytelling. You can build that model in whatever way works for you. I didn't appreciate the Enneagram until I stopped thinking of it as someone else's tool and started thinking of it as my own. So by all means, just take what I say and do what you want with it. Really. Nothing is legitimate. Nothing is sacred. Have fun with it.